Well, hello and welcome to Positivity Now, the show that focuses on all things positive. I am your host, Jonas Kane, and I have a question for all of you. Have you ever been on a trip where you're taking a train and you're on the platform? You know there's some place you want to go, but there's all these signs on the platform that says, watch the gap. It says, watch the gap. The idea being, of course, when the train pulls up to the platform, there's this gap between where you are and what you need to get on to get you to where you want to go. There's this little gap in between, right? And the idea is if you don't watch for that, you could trip over the gap and not get on the train. Or you could, even worse, if it's a big enough gap, you can fall in and get severely injured. So the idea is if we don't watch the gap, if we don't watch for the things that are preventing us from getting from where we are to where we want to go, we're not going to be able to get there. And that is the theme for today's episode. How do we get from where we are to where we want to go? One of my mentors, a man named John Maxwell, he has a list of seven gaps. I've extended the list, so I'm not sure where his list ends and mine begins, but he has a list of like 7 or 8 gaps, and I've extended it to even more. So I'm going to list off all of these potential gaps in our lives. And what I'd like you folks to do is just to listen to what these gaps are and pay special attention to the ones that you have personally experienced. Maybe it's something you're going through now. Maybe it's something that you've experienced in the past that might be a recurring theme in your life. But just take note. Gap number 1. This is the assumption gap. This one assumes that you will automatically grow and advance through life. Gap number 2, this is the knowledge gap. This one says that you don't know what you need to do. Number 3, the timing gap. You think it's not the right time. Number 4, the mistake gap. You're afraid of making mistakes and looking like a failure. That was mine for a number of years as a child. Number 5, the perfection gap. You think you need to already be perfect before you begin. A lot of us get stuck in that one. Number 6, the inspiration gap. You just don't feel inspired. You just don't feel like it. Typical high school students, right? You just don't feel like it. The comparison gap. You think others are better than you, so why bother trying in the age of social media? This is a big one. Everyone is comparing themselves to their friends and to major influencers and celebrities. That is a huge one. Number 8, the expectation gap. You thought it was going to be easier than this. That is a big one. Because we have to remember that anything worthwhile is going to take a while, by definition. And it's always going to be harder than we thought. It's going to cost us more than we thought. We're going to have to sacrifice more than we thought. So that's the end of my mentor's gap. These are the remainder of these gaps are ones that I have added in the meantime. The loner gap. You think you need to do it all on your own, and you refuse to accept help. I have a lot of friends over the years who have been stuck with that one. Number 10, the money gap. You think you can't begin because you lack the appropriate resources. A lot of things are going to take money, that's true, but there are ways to get around that. The confidence gap, you don't believe you'll actually have real success. That is a huge one. A lot of folks are struggling with that one. The worry gap, you're afraid of all the what ifs. This is my mother. Oh, I'm so worried. I love you. I love you, Mom, if you're listening. But you are a worrier. Remember, there's nothing to worry about. You can be concerned, but don't worry. Number 13, the planning gap. You spend all your time planning and no time doing. I think I get stuck in that sometimes. Number 14, the superior gap. You think you already know it all and are already perfect. I know none of you are like that, but I'm sure you know people who have that gap. The settler gap. You value good enough over improvement. That was me for way too long. The settler gap. Number 16, the skills gap. You believe you lack the proper skills to succeed. And number 17, the education gap. you believe you lack the proper education to succeed. It's a lot of gaps. So my question for you is, which gaps did you recognize as ones that perhaps have had an influence on you in the past, or maybe they still have a hold on you? So now the question becomes, now that you're aware of these gaps, and maybe there's more gaps that I just haven't recognized, but let's just focus on these ones. The question becomes, how do we get over these gaps? Well, that's what this episode today is all about. We're on episode 3 of our 8-episode series on the 8 steps for thinking, being, and staying positive. Today, it's all about the S, stimulate your passions. So check it out. So to help us overcome these gaps, whatever they happen to be for you, we take part of what's called stimulate your passion. This is the 3rd step in thinking, being, and staying positive. We talked about plan, play, and pursue. We talked about open mind, open heart. With this step is to stimulate our passions. Well, what do I mean by this? Well, basically, passions is what I define as you take your natural talents, the things that you're naturally good with, and then you also take your natural interests, the things that interest you, that you think about even when you should be thinking about other things. And when you combine it with your talents, the things that you do better than most people with little to no effort, bippity-boppity-boo, you get your passions. Now, there's those who would argue that we should focus on our passions, but I would suggest that we have to really take it that next step to stimulate our passions, because that's what's going to allow us to go from where we are to where we want to be, to get over that gap. Because if we just focus on our passions, we just focus on what we're good at, we're not going to grow. We're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to get the same old, same old. However, when we combine it and stimulate our passions, we find that there's a connection between our interests and our talents. Because when we pull down on one, we see that they are connected. So this starts to focus on our passions, but what about stimulating our passions? That's when you focus on things outside of your natural talents and interests. For example, there's a book out, it's called High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, and he says, and I'm going to paraphrase, a Super Bowl winning quarterback doesn't just know how to throw a ball. They have to master mental toughness, nutrition, brand building, contract negotiations, things that have nothing to do with throwing a ball. But if they want to become a Super Bowl winning quarterback, where they're going to have to stimulate their passions and dive into things that they're not naturally talented in. They're going to have to learn new skills. They're going to have to dive into things that aren't their natural interests. They're going to have to stimulate their passions. And that's when we find that there's connections beyond just our talents, beyond just our skills, but there's passions and there's interests that are all connected, which is why this is so important. And when we do this enough, actually, it was supposed to, sometimes that allows our interests and our passions to both grow together to allow us to get over those gaps, to get from where we are to where we truly want to be. And the best part of all, this wouldn't be a positivity magic trick if when we opened it, there were seemingly no connections at all. Everyone at home go, yay! Well, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Positivity Now. If you'd like more information or if you have any questions, please visit our website, positivitymagic.com. Until then, my name is Jonas Kane. Stay positive.